Hello and welcome to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm joined today by Teresa Marsano. Welcome to the podcast, Teresa.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here today. And for our audience, I'm going to read your bio to make sure I get everything right. Teresa is an independent researcher who has spent the past several years uncovering the many layers of deception and collusion in the development of chemical abortion drugs and the devastating effects these drugs are causing, not only to the defenseless child in the womb and their vulnerable mothers who are coerced into using them, but also the devastating consequences local communities are forced to bear where these drugs are being used. Teresa joins us today to explain how public health and environmental protection are also being aborted in the process of using these pills. So, yeah, Teresa, could you just, what led you to begin researching chemical abortion and its impacts on the environment, specifically with the aborted babies?
Sure. I was on a mission, actually a pilgrimage with Our Lady of Guadalupe, the missionary image. My role in California was closing abortion businesses. So how do you do that? You go research them. So I took Our Lady 60 days, 144 abortion mills, and prayed. And even myself then, in the back of my mind was, well, we'll just go to the surgical centers because the others, they just hand out pills. And so where I thought I was taking Our Lady on this pilgrimage, she was actually taking me. And about halfway through, now I had thought about the pill and the original approvals. I fell for the propaganda as well, just like a miscarriage, just some blood clots, just a little tissue, right? But when they changed it up in 2016, we all wear the little life pins, right? With the little feet on them, the 10 weeks. And I just lost it. And I went to prayer and what is it that we're missing? How did this happen? And so I just started thinking about that on this pilgrimage and praying. So again, halfway through, I started seeing these signs my attention was drawn to these signs on the side of the road, especially down in San Diego, LA, California. Remember, we're in California. We reclaim our water. And I kept seeing this sign, irrigated with reclaimed water, irrigated with reclaimed water. And it was the epiphany. These babies are in our reclaimed water. And this song kept going on in my head. Where have all the flowers gone? That old Peter, Paul, and Mary, I think, But it was, where do our you babies go? And it just was on. So for the rest of almost half of it, this was just in my head, in my heart. And when I got home, I went to it was actually my birthday. Now this will lead us back to why I work for Our Lady. I'm born on her Assumption. So I went to my son's softball game, and on the field was a fence, a sign, irrigated with reclaimed water, proudly irrigated. And so I started looking at, where does this reclaimed water go? And when I found that it's all in purple pipes, so that means anywhere that the irrigated water, this reused, they call it reclaimed water in California, wherever there's purple pipes, these babies are in there. Their remains, their tissue. It's called residual fetal tissue. Okay, and so they're on so I opened up in our county, where are the purple pipes water used? And we saw playgrounds. We saw, obviously, athletic fields. And then they showed a picture of children on an Easter egg hunt. And it just started from there, the outrage. And so at about the same time, they were starting what's called toilet to tap, which is where they're rinsing this water, they're throwing it back down into the water table, and then we're sucking it back up. Now, As Dr. Pat Castle and I have chatted about this from Life Runners, he's an
Mhm.
engineer chemist, brilliant man. And we talked about it and he thought about it. And he says, they may not be infectious at that point, but they're in there. In other words, um, unlike the metabolites of the pills and things like that we're also working on, the processes of the wastewater plants, the residual tissue still gets through the system.
Interesting.
And sometimes the babies don't even get to the wastewater. So what I did was I did what the FDA should have done
Mhm.
is followed the flush. They never did. They never did any study on flushing the children. That's a whole nother visit with you. I could get into the details, just how they colluded, how they manipulated the research, how they timed their approvals, and incrementally got us to this point. So I visited what they call POTWs, they're publicly owned treatment works, and went on a tour, and halfway through, the fellow says, "So, what interests you in this tour?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to find out where the babies go." And he was a young man, a student, intern, probably. Um, he just couldn't believe what I was talking about. So I explained to him that
Mhm.
women are aborting children, and are told to go to flush them. So he very, very, very gallantly took me all the way back through the processes. Where could they be? And they can be anywhere. So that's what said, this is wrong. This can't be okay. How did this get approved, or how is it being done? And it all kind of comes back to the Sanger syndrome, the industrial complex. They just do it.
Mhm.
And until someone says something or someone challenges them, they just keep doing it. And that's where we are.
Wow. I know that a lot of organizations, or not a lot, but I know of some that are looking at the environmental impact of the pills themselves with the chemicals in them. So it sounds like your focus is on what happens to the bodies of the children that women, like when they have an abortion. Is that a good summary?
It's both.
Okay.
So, what got me on this rabbit hole was finding out how this happened.
Okay.
And I was focused on the fact that we're literally consuming these children in many ways. So, um, I've worked with Students for Life, and I'm working with Ohio. There's a couple of groups around the United States I'm working with, sharing the information that I've found, because there's so much out there. It's hard to look at it all. And
Mhm.
each of us kind of have a different view, and that's good. But you're right. We should not be flushing children. Now, we shouldn't be aborting them. We shouldn't be incinerating them. We certainly shouldn't be flushing them. And this is where the diabolical side comes in, is the desecration of the image of God.
Mm.
And, we're kind of complicit in this, in that we have failed to protect these little brothers and sisters of ours. That's why the project under Our Lady's Mission for Life, which is my mantle, excuse me, I'm under her mantle. um, this is a project, we call it Gen 410 for Genesis 4:10, which is the after Cain kills Abel and the Lord cries out, "What have you done? The blood of the voice of your brother's blood is calling out to me from the earth." And that kind of came to me after seeing these signs and all that certainly they're calling out from not only the land, the water, now we know, but it's also because of repurposing. So I'm kind of jumping around. I'll do my best here. But anything that goes down the toilet comes out somewhere.
Mhm.
It doesn't disappear. So when the abortionists tell the women, just flush, it'll disappear, that's
Mhm.
not the truth, right? So these children are being processed. in what's designed, millions of dollars are spent. Engineers, environmentalists, all trying to reuse water to benefit communities, benefit the environment. And here we are, this has happened, this assault on all of our communities. So, to go back to your question, yes, I'm focused on the fact that they are unlawfully disposing of their generated waste, medical waste, fetal human remains,
Mm-hmm.
into our community. And we're having to deal with the proper disposal of them, which we can't control if they go down the toilet. We could if the POTWs would work with us, but so far it just hasn't gotten quite there yet.
Okay.
So I've been mostly feeding information into the groups that are trying to do something.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like this has been your like big research project. So then,
Can't help it. God asks you to do something. So I'll tell you real quickly. So I was in adoration and okay, Lord, what are we missing here? And he literally showed me, kind of in our prayerful state that we get into is Our Lady in the sewer picking up babies. And once you see that, you realize what they're asking us to do is stop that, right?
mhm,
And in this um, exposure, uh, can we bring the humanity of the child back into view, which I think is critical for all of us.
yeah. So is flushing the bodies of the aborted babies down the toilet the like official quote unquote disposal that is recommended with the abortion pill?
This is what's interesting. I say it's what they don't say that gives them away.
Mm,
So when they created the medication guide, and then the take home, oh, get a hot water bottle, get a movie, get a book, sit down. And then they tell you when you start cramping, sit on the toilet. It's more comfortable.
okay.
That's it. They don't go the next step. If it was legal, they would have said, okay to flush or wrap up and put in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
None of it's lawful. They know it because it's in their medical waste and in their business license agreements with any local medical waste like county, state, who's ever regulating. Every state's different. I've studied most states because in California we just don't have the legal power, the courts. So Katie Short with Life Legal, back when I was looking at this in 2017, said, go find any other state. So I did. Florida is really going to be helpful because they already have regulations in place. But basically in California, they're breaking the law. They know it. They were warned about it before the pill was even approved, and yet they choose to do it anyway. That was their devised protocol, was to send the women home
So there's
from the
no
beginning.
official like instructions to the woman of what to do.
It's only verbal, like you had Myra on, and many of the recovered abortion workers will
Mm-hmm.
explain they're told that, but it's not in writing. See,
Mm-hmm.
what if it were in writing, then they would be liable for it, right?
Gotcha.
So if they just tell them, well, it just goes back to the fact that the pill generates the waste. Whoever dispenses the pill is responsible for that, not the woman, but
Mm-hmm.
the generator. The generator is the drug. So literally the drug company is responsible. It's called international end user responsibility. When
Okay.
you sell something that creates a hazardous waste.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even want to talk about babies in the same sentence as medical waste.
Mm-hmm.
Babies, even in California, because they're human, uh, require sanitary and respectful disposition.
Mm-hmm.
Flushing into the sewer doesn't qualify for any of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So by just merely devising the protocol where they send her away from the clinic, that doesn't relieve them of the responsibility that they have as the generator. It actually makes them complicit in an unlawful act, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's why the coercion, where the coercion comes in, and there was $12 million spent when they were bringing the drug here. $12 million. How they could make this pill, number one, the protocol, palatable to women, since in Europe they were actually rejecting it by 2/3, going home alone,
Yeah.
and how we would accept it as the public. So they came up just like a miscarriage. Who's going to, you know, condone or condemn a woman with a miscarriage? There's a difference there.
Mm-hmm.
A miscarriage is a tragic accident. I like to use this story that if I'm driving my car and the oil plug comes out and I dribbled oil all over the road, that's horrible. I can't really go back and fix that. That was something I couldn't control. I say that's like a woman with a spontaneous miscarriage at home.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go to the store and buy oil and and they sell me a wrench to undo the oil plug and tell me to park over a storm drain to drain the oil, then that's unlawful disposal, right? And they're complicit.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah.
And these women don't know.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up the miscarriage, because that was one question I did have, was how is what's done with the abortion pill different than like a standard practice for miscarriage? Because obviously not like what a woman should be doing with the body of a child who miscarries, but like what is just generally done in our culture. And so I'm glad that you brought up like the difference of intentional versus accidental.
Right. So part of the palatability of this was desensitizing us to miscarriage at home. Prior to I think it was 93, most women were encouraged to come into the hospital to control the miscarriage because they know how dangerous it can be and how a woman can rupture. That's care for women, right? Very careful, close supervision. Gradually, the practice of the American ACOG was to start sending them home. And that was part of the research. I went, when did they start sending them home? I know lots of moms who have tragically miscarried, to send them home. Now, they start giving them some of these pills as well, particularly the second one. Well, again, that's another show, but that drug is known to rupture soft tissue. In all of its original pharmaceutical reviews for a stomach pill, well, if they're either ingesting or inserting this pill into soft tissue, the probability of, I call it rupture roulette, you really don't know who's going to be, who's already started to tear, whether it's miscarriage or from the mifeprex. So again, I don't think babies should be flushed, whether they're aborted or miscarried, if it's medically managed. I think we can do that by taking the pill off the open market. That's the goal. I understand the efforts to back it up to 2016. I get incrementalization. That's how we got here. Mm-hmm. But the drug should have never been approved for use outside of an office, hospital, or clinical setting, which is what the original application was. Mm-hmm. They're asked, where's it going to be administered?
Yeah.
Okay. And originally it was a 4-hour stay. Mm-hmm. I think it is cruel and medically unjustifiable to send a woman home, whether she's to miscarry or to abort to kill her own child on her own without very close care. We don't approve of abortion ever, But if we're going to care for the mother truly, she should be in a surgical center. They call it a surgical theater in case she hemorrhages. And she'll hemorrhage. If she's going to hemorrhage, she usually does within the first 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
So do you see? And so, yeah, I don't think the miscarried baby should either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's miskits that most women that know they're going to miscarry from their doctor, they're going to get a miskit. No mom wants to flush her baby, right? And so now they are burying them in the backyard because the people helping them aren't giving them any options. Because you see, if ACOG, if they gave them an option of taking your baby to respectful repose, then we're going to have that argument for the aborted baby. So what did they do? They offloaded all of it.
What happened in 2016? You brought that up a couple times, and I'm actually not that familiar with the different licensings of the abortion.
Oh, so there was a couple of steps that they were incrementalizing, and the efficacy rate on the pill concoction when they first got it approved in 2000 was too low at 10 weeks. So what they did is they had it go through at 7 weeks, and then FDA rules are once the drug's approved, you can use it off label. So 96% of the abortion industry used the drug off label from day one. They were giving it to 10 weeks. But officially, Obama, before he left office, literally in December, I think it was, of 2016. So that would have been first. Anyway, I get them all confused.
It was his second term. It was right before.
Yes, it was because Bush was coming in.
Trump.
And what they did is two things. They went from 7 weeks to 10 weeks.
Okay.
That was the biggie.
Mm-hmm.
The second biggie was they changed officially the amount of drugs they were giving of each. Remember, there's 2 drugs. Mm-hmm. When timed and combined, expel the baby.
Yes, because the first one is the one that blocks basically the food of the placenta. So it starts.
Well,
and then the second one is the one that causes the contractions.
Yes. And we can do a whole show on APR, why it works, because the baby's not dead. The first pill does not kill the baby. It's not feticidal in any way. It only looses the placental bond and does interfere with the progesterone. But a small baby, remember, they got it approved at 7 weeks. That child's doing a different thing at 7 weeks. They're in their own environment. They're living in their own amniotic sac. They haven't really attached to mommy yet. So very different. But let's go back to 2016. So now the baby's bigger. Now the baby's more, the placenta's bigger. So did 2 things. The high dose of mifepristone, the RU486, at 600 milligrams was too high, and the women were having autoimmune issues. It also, once they started bleeding, created more bleeding. So they knew before even approval that they only needed to use 200. So they did that. But it wasn't official. And so that 2016 change brought that down to 200. What it also did, though, is it doubled the cytotec. And this drug, even today, is still being used off-label, is not approved for this use due to inadequate safety studies. Just so we know. All right. So it doubled that, meaning the contractions are going to be harder, because they needed more of that drug at a 10-week-old baby than they did with the 7-week-old baby. So they raised that. And then they also said, well, it was originally approved where they could give them the pill and send them home after they had to take the pill in the clinic to make sure she actually took it. Mm-hmm. And in 2016, they sent them home with the pill. And what they ended up doing was not only sending them home with 800 micrograms,
Mhm.
They sent him home with four more in case the first four didn't work. So now you're at 1,600 micrograms. Why is that important? That's the toxic level for that drug when it's used as a stomach aid.
Mhm.
And now we're even hearing where they're giving them 2,400 micrograms, which is above toxics. And what's really amazing is, and almost criminal, is in labeling the toxic side effects of cytotec, which they call it misoprostol,
Mhm.
are the adverse events of mifeprex,
Hmm.
right? So if you take it as a stomach pill and you have nausea, you have diarrhea, you have high fever,
Mhm.
you go to the hospital because you're at a toxic level. But if you're aborting, they tell you, we'll stay home and stick it out because it will wear off in a couple of hours.
Interesting.
Right. So
Yeah.
when we talk about the substandard care of women, this is it.
Mhm.
This is it on so many levels. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I started this because the babies were being flushed, and I end up uncovering all this about these drugs.
Yeah.
So
Well,
um,
like you said, abortion should never be happening in the first place. But like as pro-lifers, it's important to call out the fact that women are also being endangered by these procedures because even from a point of incrementalism, if you can at least move the abortion pill to have to be used in a very specific environment, that's going to limit the number of abortions that are happening and you can slowly walk it back.
Yeah, because when I was in high school, they were using some of these drugs back then. I remember hearing the horror stories of the girls going in on a Saturday and having to stay there into the night, and they were all aborting in different rooms, literally. That's when they first started way back some trials before it was even had been approved for trials, but they were using them off label.
Mm,
See?
yeah.
So it's an outrage.
Mhm.
I pray with our new FDA, HHS um, administration, that they will take a proper good look at it. I am working with some lawyers to kind of draft it in a way that can be understood. The original criminality, the original collusion, the original fraudulent applications,
Mhm.
those need to be looked at all the way back because this goes back to 1934, wartime, that they've been using these drugs. Um, and it was always the plan. In fact, when COVID hit, remember Planned Parenthood's president came out, this is our silver lining, because they've been trying to get these women home from the very beginning. You had asked about 2016. So now they just take both pills and go home. Well, what if her plans change? Well, they have, the dating, and we can get into all that craziness. And her plans changed. So, oh, I got invited. So I'm going to wait till next weekend. And now that baby's 11 weeks, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 14 weeks. And this is the big issue with this new telemed, the just obliteration of all safety standards
Mhm.
is any age, any sex, anywhere they're selling these drugs. And the manufacturer actually has a responsibility of black market, and that's
Mhm.
not being enforced.
Interesting. Well, and then also there's the concern if a woman has negative blood needing the RH shot if her child has positive blood, and that's also not talked about. Whereas if she's having an abortion for a child, then her body could create those antibodies for any future pregnancies.
And
So,
that's critical because,
yeah.
again, if we're not properly dating women,
Mhm.
or they're taking it, quote unquote, at a time and place convenient to her, she's
Mhm.
now put herself, if she hasn't been coached on that, if she hasn't fully consented to that knowledge, then she's endangering herself forever. Right. And that's another really big issue with these drugs. These women are not being properly consented. That second pill is still off label. It requires, by law, a separate, proper consent and acknowledgement that it is being used off label. Now, that's going to get into a big can of worms once we get the right lawyers on it to challenge the original intended use of cytotec and how it's being used off label. right?
I didn't realize it was off label. That's interesting.
Yeah, it. So the argument is, well, it got approved as the use this too, but even
Mhm.
Pfizer will hide behind their I call it covering their assets. They'll hide behind the fact, well, we put it in our labeling, in our packaging, that it's not approved. Well, I'm sorry, the girls, are they even given the packaging? Because
Mhm.
we ordered some pills online to see how they came. Number one, that Cytotec's supposed to be in a blister packet, and they're not. They're just put in a little bottle. So they've been exposed to air. Now you expose them and tell them to wet them before they take them. They're exposing that some of the bacteria that these women are getting these infections, that comes from the manufacturing in India. And this is, like I said, there's so
Clearly.
much. And um, but see, my general right here, my director, she just sends me down these rabbit holes. I was raised around a dinner table with an appellate lawyer. My dad fought um, uh, workers' comp fraud.
Mhm.
And liars lie, crooks leave clues, and corporate liars publish their fraud. So you just have to find it, right? And that's what I did. So we have everything we need that FDA colluded
Mhm.
and in the passage in the approval of these drugs. They can go back to FDA, both of them,
Interesting.
and they should not be approvable,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because what's the use?
Yeah.
To expel fetal remains.
Interesting. So you had talked earlier about following the flush. Could you just talk our audience through what happens to the bodies of these babies after they're flushed?
Okay. So we've seen in the news babies stuck in apartment building pipes. We've
Mhm.
seen them even in toilets, right? In restaurants and things like that. So those are the older babies. The women are not properly dating. But let's just talk about the standard, even if they say 10 weeks, 11 weeks, we know that it's probably mostly used between 9 and 12. The abortionists know this. The pills don't work real well before 9 weeks, and they don't work real well after 15 weeks. Okay, so that's just kind of, we know that they're kind of gearing these women to stay within these. So the baby goes down the toilet. Now, a couple of things happen. And so bear with me, everybody, because this gets really kind of nasty. But I think until we really get a reality check on that,
Mhm.
we're being complicit in it, right? Okay, so the babies will go through a sewer system, and our pipe from our house is this big, but then it goes into the street, and there's these bladders that will push all the excrement, everything that goes down the toilet to these what they're called lift grates. Okay, so
Mhm.
that's the first grate. Now, fats, oils, and grease get caught here. They call them fat burps, and they're big glogs, and you'll see them on the news, baby wipes and fats, oils, and grease. Well, there's also babies in there. That's
Mhm.
one of our campaigns at the Capitol Hill right now. It's not the baby wipes, it's the babies that are clogging pipes. So that can actually cause an overflow in your city, in your street. Okay. So this happens in Florida a lot. Like they went from maybe one overflow in Orlando up to five in just during that 2016 time.
Mhm.
Coincidence? Maybe. So they can get stuck there, which means that they're lifted out with a backhoe and sent out to the landfill. Hospital in San Jose, three placenta wraps after birth, they got caught disposing, and it was over $1 million in fines. So dumping any babies
Mhm.
and their placentas, right? No matter how small. Remember, in EPA, it doesn't matter how much it is; it's what it is.
Mhm.
Okay, because if that one placenta is infected from mom, attaches to all the rest in that process, it's
Mhm.
contaminating everything along the way. So the contamination is exponential.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the first sift. And then they will go and let's say they get through that. So the grates are 1/8 inch. Smaller babies will get through. They don't dissolve like the excrement. See, this is designed to kind of break up the poop and stuff. Because the babies, we call it a viscous. It's a human body. There's little cartilage, little sticky skin. The placenta is an organ, so it doesn't disintegrate, doesn't break down. If it gets to what's called the bar screen, the head of the wastewater plant, again, there's another sift to get the Legos out, to get the things that everybody flushes down their toilet that they didn't mean to or they're not supposed to. Again, that gets collected, put in a garbage bin, and sent out to the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So the bigger babies are going maybe to the landfill. But let's say one of these they have these bladders along the way that kind of push them through.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're in the process of the wastewater plant. Whatever goes in there comes out somewhere. It's either sifted off after several hours and put into biosolids. Now you'll hear biosolids. That's all the stuff sifted off, the sand, the poop left over, and it kind of settles and they scrape it and then they put it in a truck and either take it out and put it on our crops, put it out in pastures. Some burn it for energy. Babies are in there. But by now, some of those babies have been desecrated, mutilated along the way. And then any, residual tissues are going to be in the water side. Mm-hmm. So they're microscopic. But you yourself, you did a beautiful paper on fetal cells in cosmetics. We know the fetal cells are in vaccines. These are beyond fetal cells, as Dr. Pat Castle says. These are actual residual tissues. Mm-hmm. They're microscopic. Now, I haven't tried to find them. I don't have the $3 million that it would take to find them but that's not my job. That's FDA's job. That's the drug maker's job to convince all of us, to assure us that we're not consuming. Because after this, then the fertilizers in our crops or in Lowe's, the bag of fertilizer you buy for your garden, for your roses, theoretically, logically, they could be in there. And then the effluent that goes out into the water, like the environment, let's say. In Florida in particular, up by Jacksonville, there's 5 plants. They only do secondary rinse and then dump into the river, the Indian, I want to say it's above the St. Lucie, sorry. But that's where all the seagrass for the manatees is dying. Now they're blaming it on the agriculture overflow, but what if it's not? What if it's the imbalance, Jackson, near some colleges, maybe near a lot of abortions? When these babies come through, they're full of phosphorus and nitrogen, and they're treating them thinking it's just poop and pee with the chemicals, but actually too much phosphorus and nitrogen are coming out. Are they because of the babies? I don't know. I think that somebody else need to prove that it doesn't. Right? So then we've got them in our water. And if they're recharging our water table in Florida, they're in the Everglades, in the rivers, in the reservoirs. In California, Lake Mission Viejo is recharged with purple pipe water. So California, they're everywhere.
Yeah. Is there any other way our water could get contaminated with like human cells, or is it only the aborted babies? Because that's a objection I could see someone making to this argument of like, oh, well, anytime there's rain on a graveyard, then theoretically it could get contaminated, or someone talking through some other way that human cells could end up in our water system. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Would that be incidental or intentional?
This seems more incidental for people that are consuming products, though, that could be contaminated with the water. Because when you're taking cosmetics or vaccines or anything that is directly made and wouldn't exist except for the fetal cells, that seems more intentional than the evil of the abortion company is contaminating the water. It seems like there's different levels there.
Could be, but I think it goes back to the fact that these are humans. They're
Hmm.
being fleshed, they're being unlawfully fleshed. So what you have to do is you have to say it's unlawful. These are
Hmm.
the reasons why. Medical wastes are regulated for a reason, that their disposal because of their contamination. All medical personnel, if you're licensed, you have agreed to what's called universal precautions,
Okay.
which is to protect the public from harm. In the clinic, when they extract these babies, they have to segregate them, separate them, and make sure that they're disposed of the baby here, the regulated waste here, and the other special waste over here. These babies are going down the toilet, not separated, not segregated. In Texas, they used to be able to pre-treat them in a chemical, put them through a garbage disposal, and then it was legal to put them out. Now they changed that law once we all said, wait a minute, we're approving human cells, human beings,
Hmm.
right? So when I got on this, I was looking for the unlawfulness, and then I was now more the offensiveness of it all.
Yeah.
It's and there's rules on that too. This is our public water, and we have a right to know what's in our water, and it's not being disclosed. Um, it's also what's called an offensive contaminant, meaning morally we're objected to it. And we have rights on that. So we just have to follow through on some of that. But for the last 4 years, for sure, we haven't been able to maybe get anywhere on that. And hopefully
Yeah.
we will now.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree it's a problem. It was just more of like, how would you respond to people saying that? And that seems like a good response. So,
Yeah, the biggest challenge is the miscarriage, or a woman with a heavy period. Again, it's a blood clot. So remember, they told us it was just blood clot
mhm.
and tissues, meaning they break down. The babies
Yeah.
don't break down. They break down differently. Show me, show me where you looked at that and deemed it a-okay, and then our argument is moot.
Mhm.
But I don't think they'll be able to. And the other is going back to what I found in this foxhole was the unlawful approval of the drugs in the first place.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that's definitely a whole other issue on its own. It could be a whole other
Yeah, I
podcast.
know. I
Um,
know.
um, I feel like a lot of people are going to hear something like this and just be like, that can't be happening, or that's a conspiracy theory. What are your responses to that? It sounds like you've kind of gone through every step that happens. So I feel like the episode up till now has been a bit of a response. But do you have any other thoughts on that idea?
I get that. And I've gotten that for the last 4 years, trying to bring this into view. And as other groups have done their own independent study, they come up with the same answers.
Mm.
This is wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, um, is it a conspiracy theory? I say it's more logical than anything. It's a reality check to what's really going on. And can you convince me that it's okay? Because every city has restrictions on what you can flush down the toilet. Several of them being what's called fleshings,
Hmm.
flesh. Can't flush a goldfish, can't flush anything live. Um, Nothing that's viscous because it clogs the drain. So, do we want to argue this on the fact that is disrupting the systems? In Texas, I have a gentleman that used to be an engineer there, and they were told to enlarge the grates from 1/8 inch to 1/2 so they could allow more body parts through into the system.
Ooh.
But it was legal there,
Yeah.
right? But he was so disturbed when he realized what this really meant, that he was complicit in this desecration of little babies.
Hmm.
And we have to go back to that because, we are our brother's keeper. We're responsible. This is, so I guess my work is my reparation for my participation in not doing more. And it's been very hard the last few years to get anything done on this. Things are changing now. It's a topic that many are talking about now. So now we can get into all the details that I have in my files, that each little paragraph might, have a lot of value in the cases that are coming forth. So, we want to say, how did we come to this? And that's a line from Soylent Green. I don't know if you know the movie. It was a dystopian thriller back in the 73, almost, I want to say, where they were kind of like they have now, those killer pods where you can go in the pod and go, and they were taking the bodies and making them protein because Earth had killed all their plants and whatnot. And this investigator, found that they were eating these little protein pellets that were people. Now, one of the great lines is, how did we come to this? And it's the abortion industry. They have professionals with their propaganda, and then they incrementally desensitize us to a point of indifference. And as we all know, Planned Parenthood and others have relied for years on our ignorance. So I'm no longer ignorant about this particular subject. And I hope that others understand this is not a hype. This is not a fear factor. This is reality. You can go to your local wastewater plant yourself and see that exactly what I'm talking about is going on. And when you follow the biosludge, that's of greatest concern. The other concern is the babies in the sewer, because they're exposed to sewer vermin. And that, to me, it is that, I call it the eighth sword in our Blessed Mother's heart, the seven sorrows. This is the eighth one. And she's asking us to take that sword out of her back, so to speak. And we need to stop this, whatever it takes. Yes, we can look at the metabolites, very important. We can look at the babies in the water and in our food, very important. But actually, the idea of sending a woman home to deal with this on her own is actually, in my heart, I think it's diabolical in a way. How could anybody be so cruel? Right?
I mean, I guess if you can murder a preborn child, then you can be cruel to anybody.
And you have no problem exposing everybody to all this, because they really, do we know that they don't care? Or did they just not think about it? Or did they just take advantage of something? Did anyone really think it through? Those are some answers that we need, and some corrections that need to happen. Mm-hmm. And I understand that doctors, legitimate pro-life doctors, use some of these drugs in different ways for women to really help them in life-saving situations. That's in a surgical theater. Those pills should only be approved for the use in the immediate presence of a surgeon. That was the original exception. And they've taken us baby steps into where we are today. And so I'd be remiss not to bring forth the diabolical side of this. Like, what's worse than aborting the baby in the first place? Maybe incinerating this child and not properly giving it at least a sanitary cremation, right? Mm-hmm. They'll burn it with the rest of the waste. Flushing a baby into the holy image of God into the sewers is a diabolical influence that we can't ignore. So there's a prayer that comes with this as well, I think. We need a prayer campaign to also really focus, when we're trying to, quote unquote, exorcise a demon out of a person. We need to exorcise this demon out of this action of abortion. And maybe if we pray specifically for that, um, the shackles will come undone and we can see the truth and get some answers, you know?
It also seems like this is a good tactic to push back against the abortion industry in general, too, because people do tend to care about the environment. So if you can't win an argument saying that abortion is immoral, you might be able to reach people by pointing out how this is going to damage the environment or damage the water systems and all of that, too.
And agreed. It's a shame that we have to go about it that way.
Yeah.
But if in the end it reveals and brings the humanity of the child and the dignity of the woman as a mother back into view, I'll go that route.
Yeah.
I'll go whatever route we need to take, right? And won't it also be a new audience? You know, we in the pro-life movement, we talk among ourselves, we're preaching to the choir about new things, but getting across out into the general public is a challenge because they just shut us off, right? Um, Maybe this will create a new outreach, a new venue, a new view.
Yeah.
I hope, I mean, it should.
Yeah. When you talk to people about it, what response do you get? Do they care? Are they indifferent? Do they just dismiss it? Are they horrified?
Sadly, okay, you'll get both. Like I did a little walkabout and asked, especially men on their golf course. I, do you ever see like little fingers or toes? Just trying to get their head wrapped around the fact of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's not fingers or toes, but there's babies. Their tissues are there. Okay. Um, I get a lot of pushback from my favorite doctors that say, you don't go after the drug because we need it. And I said, okay, well, let's work together on that. The water, most
Doctors who
people,
want to use it for miscarriage.
yeah, and they do use it in birthing and labor, and 493 women have died. I don't think this is a drug that should be even used for that, but that's another story. Let's see. So most will shut it out. Most people don't believe. They think, oh, they must take care of all this in the process. And I said, well, go visit, and they don't. One dear friend of ours, Alan Parker with Justice Foundation in Texas, when I first explained it to him, bless his heart, he really reacted as we all should. Oh my gosh. I most people say I never thought of it that way. I never thought it through. I never really thought it all the way through, right? And he came up with the verse from Deuteronomy. And it's 28:53, if we don't stop the evil, then the evil will feed us the fruit of our own wombs. And that's kind of where we are. It's horrific. It's haunting. And so we need to take the lead on bringing it to others and ending it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Do you have
what was your reaction when you first saw the brochure from John? I mean, you had heard about it.
I'd heard about the problems of at least the chemical side of it, the chemicals
Right.
in the water. And that's something that I'd wanted to do a podcast on for years because the environmental side of it, both for birth control and the abortion pill, I think is a really important
It's a big deal.
It's an important tool for pro-lifers to have in their tool belt. Like if you want to stop something, you have to be able to attack it from all directions. And the environmental aspect is a really key one in today's world. So I was glad that he had met someone who knew about this side of it. I don't know that I thought so much about the aborted, like the babies side of it. But I can't say I was surprised. Like it was like, that makes sense. That's horrible, like horrifying, horrible. But like, yeah, that makes sense if they're being flushed into the water, that there would be some type of contamination. So yeah, I guess a combination of horrified, but also being numbed to the fact that like, once you accept what abortion is, like we know it kills an innocent child, I feel like nothing is as horrible as that.
Yeah, and I think that's hopefully what this will bring us back to.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it horrible? Because it's a baby, right?
Yeah.
And so we just have to be justice minded.
Mm-hmm.
We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect the women. We have to protect the babies. Um, my over focus on it was always a curse, but now it's a blessing. And I'm really grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you having me on so that we can talk about it a little bit more in a new lane.
Mm-hmm.
I did get a text yesterday that Kristen Hawkins was in at Liberty University and talking about the babies again.
Yeah.
So bringing that back into view. I've been helping her team. Well, Christy, other one. Sorry, Christy, can't remember your last name. Just bringing all of this into this pool of information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you research it, you end up to the same point that I've ended up. But sometimes we need to do that on our own to really get it in our head and then in our heart.
Yeah.
And then action.
Well, and I think it's important when you talk about topics like this to be able to talk about it very science and fact based as well. Because if you just go off on like, well, this is happening, but you don't know the details of like X, Y, or Z and being able to explain it, it looks just kind of radical and fanatic and people just like dismiss it immediately. So being able to really say like, okay, this is like, let's follow each of the steps and explain factually what's going on. It grounds the argument and like the reasons why this is wrong in like a means that people can understand.
Yeah, well, that's why I have I have several, consultants, my OBGYN friend. I also have Dr. Pat Castle, who's our kind of chemical guy that looked at it scientifically. And then an engineer that used to work at not just the great guy, but another engineer that used to actually do the chemical treatments in the water. And he said, absolutely, by far, these babies are the pills they're throwing off the balance of this, and we have to get them on our side too. And that's kind of my next step.
Yeah,
is going to reuse in DC because they're all over trying to convince everybody to reuse. It's like, oh, so yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts for today or things you'd like to say to listeners who, after this conversation, are just either horrified or want something to do next?
So again, like you introduced me, I'm just my call has been to research, find this information, and get it to the groups that are already going. There's no reason for me to create any new group.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody can use some of my information, please get a hold of me. The other is if anyone knows someone who worked in the FDA, I would love to talk to them. It's hard for me to have some conversations with people because the layer of where I've gone and be able to talk about Title 23 to paragraph 24, public nuisance and all these little things will be better with someone with a little more knowledge on that. Anyone interested, I have a little email that you have. It's Jen 410 for Genesis 410, and it's p@pm.me. Is that okay that I put that out there?
Yeah, I can put it in the description as well.
Okay, because it's like I don't have I've got to set up a website and maybe do just an information dump at this point. But we all know one thing. This information could not get out until after January 20th at 12:01 because the other side is so devious that they will take some of this and beat you to the punch, right? It's what happened in California years ago. So now we're ready to start dumping everything. So again, I'm here to help those that are already doing it. Or if somebody thinks they can help me in any way, I would love that as well.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Teresa, thank you for being on the show today. This has been a horrifying, but also fascinating and just very important conversation.
Well,
So thank you.
thanks for helping lead me through it because the information is so mass. And just everybody out there, Colleen's the most wonderful, wonderful interviewer and has helped me through a lot of this. So thank you very much. And thanks, Human Life International too, to bring this up when, like you say, most people don't want to talk about it.
Well, thank you, Teresa. This has been very good. And to all of our listeners, please like and subscribe. Check out the ebooks that we have. I'll link the one about cosmetics on the end screen since we brought that up in today's conversation. And keep on living the culture of life. God bless.